I want to sincerely apologize to you, madam. I behaved rudely to the Duchess yesterday, said Ben. If you're now talking about yesterday, that you didn't let me into my husband's room, then I've already forgotten about it. The main thing is that it ended well. Now you'd better sit down. I want to ask you some questions. Elena answered. Yesterday, His Excellency had more than just a cold, am I right? I noticed that there were no other symptoms besides a fever. I mean a cough or something like that. Why did the Duke have such a high fever? I'm not sure, but it happens once a year for reasons I don't understand. It started when he was a baby, before those people had time to do anything to him, narrated Ben. What people? Are you talking about the Duke and Duchess now? Why don't you address them in a respectful manner? Wondered Elena. I prefer to use respectful speech only to honorable people. I don't have to address animals that way, replied Ben. Ben, aren't you just gorgeous? When did you have time to change so much? I see you'll even learn to make jokes eventually, Elena remarked. I kept thinking that Madame would leave us soon, but after yesterday my opinion has changed. Allow me to introduce myself again. I am the butler of this duchy. My name is Ben. I hope you will look after me in the future. I apologize for being rather rude to you for a long time. It was all because I didn't know you well. You turned out to be nothing like I imagined you to be. You shouldn't apologize, and you shouldn't break yourself. Act natural. It will be easier for you and more familiar to me. And now that we've resolved any misunderstandings, I have a question, said Elena. The accident that happened 9 years ago isn't just a coincidence, is it? Who is the person who was in the same carriage with the Duke and Duchess? Who is Kaiwin's younger brother? I somehow feel that that incident didn't happen by chance. You are surprisingly perceptive. You are right. A month before the incident, one of the maids went missing. Everyone thought she had simply disappeared, however. It came to my attention that she was murdered, and the killer turned out to be the Duke's younger brother, narrated Ben. The Duke and Duchess knew what had happened, but chose to hide it. It also came to my attention that the man who drove the carriage was the brother of the murdered maid. I believe it was revenge for the younger sister. You mean to say that the cabman knew who was responsible for his sister's death? Helena clarified. The late Duke and Duchess were quite strict, however. Their son began drinking at a fairly early age. It was this that led to the tragedy. But since everyone in the family except Kaiwin died, rumors began to spread at lightning speed. So why are you hiding everything? Why won't you tell the public the whole truth? Elena asked, to which the manager told her that the Duke was against it. Kaiwin believes he is also responsible for what happened. He knew that the charioteer was the dead maid's brother, but he didn't tell anyone about it. The Duke believes that his family is dead because of his mistake. He should have known in advance that the charioteer would seek revenge, explained Ben. Well, how do you feel about it? Do you really agree with his opinion? Asked Helena. Of course not. If you examine the matter more closely, the incident was my fault. I was the one who handed the wine that day to the servant who took it to the Duke's younger brother. And I knew, too, that the charioteer was the maid's older brother, replied Ben. Helena went in search of her husband. This whole situation was extremely unpleasant for her. She did not understand why the Duke did not want to tell the whole truth and get rid of the terrible nickname. Elena remembered one of Rosalind's advice. She should have come up with an affectionate nickname for her husband. Elena found her spouse on the training ground. Elena heard the knights admiring the Duke's talent. Kaiwin was extremely skillful with a sword. The girl was pleased to hear that. You know, I'd like to have a branding, too. I heard that it's called a demon's gift. In my next life, I want to be blessed not by a god, but by the devil, Thomas admitted. And why did you come to the training ground? Asked Kaiwin of his spouse. I heard you were training here, so I came. And what are you going to do next? Are you going to go to your office? If so, let's go together, Elena suggested. What's wrong with you? Are you upset about something? Asked Kaiwin to his spouse. Will something happen if you throw out one of the knights? Asked Elena. If you're talking about Thomas now, You shouldn't take offense at him. He just doesn't know how to watch his language, replied the Duke. Well, since you know that your subordinate can say stupid things behind your back, then why don't you react to it in any way? Elena resented. Even so, he's quite a trustworthy knight and meets all standards. Also, he has almost nothing to do with the duchy, Kywin explained. How can you make decisions based on a person's abilities and usefulness? Elena wondered. Her husband's point of view was incomprehensible to her. The only thing the girl realized was that she would have to go through many more trials before they would fall in love. Elena began to bombard her husband with questions. She was curious about what he loved, what he hated, what he was into, and what his hobbies were. It turned out that the Duke was absolutely nothing interesting. He spent all his free time in his study. Elena began to think that her husband is a real stone statue. Even his thoughts were stone. Elena really wanted to find something to connect them, some common interests and hobbies. Elena decided to give her husband some kind of gift. She hoped that at least it would melt his heart. As she stepped out of the carriage, Elena heard someone's frightened scream. Some man was calling for help and shouting loudly that a pickpocket had stolen his wallet. Turning around, Elena saw a man running towards her. She guessed it was the thief. "It's dangerous here, madam. Hide in the carriage, quickly!" shouted the maid. From over the maid's shoulder, Elena saw that a knight ran up to the thief and knocked him to the ground. In the night, Elena recognized Thomas. Thomas told Elena that today was his day off, so he decided to go to the market for fruit. There he saw a thief, so he chased after him. The thief was approached by the guards. They tied his hand and took him to jail. Elena scrutinized Thomas's face. What if her husband was right, and Thomas really was honest and a pretty good knight? Be that as it may, I still think you are wrong. You shouldn't talk nonsense behind your commander's back. Shifting her eyebrows on the bridge of her nose, Elena said, "You're right, I shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry you heard my words. I'm truly sorry for what happened," said Thomas and bowed low before Elena. "Actually, I was so angry that I was ready to throw you out, but the Duke stopped me. According to him, you are an honest and quite capable knight, but you should pay attention to your manner of speech," Elena said in an angry tone. "It surprises me that the Duke reacts so calmly to all this. I have a different opinion on this, so kindly correct yourself." "I will. I'll make it up to you," shouted Thomas. "Very good. Now enjoy your weekend, and when you come back, work harder," said Elena and went shopping. Back at the manor, Elena asked the maids for their opinions on Thomas. The maids said only good things about him. The manager, Ben, did not like Thomas, as he was always making trouble for nothing. Ben even called Thomas a scumbag. I apologize. It's hard for me to contain my emotions when I hear that annoying guy's name. However, I want to admit that in reality, he's not completely useless. On the contrary, he's a person with exceptional abilities. In his hometown, Thomas was even called a prodigy. His defiant temperament showed itself last year when he lost in a battle. After that, he became completely disobedient, forgetting his place. Thomas feels guilty in front of the Lord, so sometimes he might accidentally say something unnecessary. I've already asked the Duke several times to kick Thomas out, but he won't even listen to me. I guess it's because Thomas is very capable. After talking to the servants, I realized that Thomas is everyone's favorite. There's something about him that attracts people, Elena remarked. He may be a good man, but he has a glib tongue. He needs to learn to watch his speech, said Ben. In the evening, Helena went to her husband's study. She suggested that he take a walk in the night garden. When you are here, doesn't it bring back memories of that time? Elena asked her husband. Usually the garden only lifts my spirits. Every time I hid here, no one could find me. That comfort is something I remember forever, replied the Duke. Elena asked the Duke to sit on the bench and give her his hand. Elena decided to give her husband a pair of cufflinks adorned with a pink stone. You've never had any preferences, have you? Then let's slowly start creating them, shall we? From this day forward, your favorite color will be pink. I'd like to point out that your image suits the color pink very well. Also, My eyes are the same color." "Thank you for the gift. I really liked it," said Kaiwin and smiled gently. "Did you really like my gift?" asked a blushing Elena. Kaiwin nodded affirmatively. "Then wear it more often, or I'll think you were joking." Elena was happy to please her husband. Elena asked the Duke that this night he would sleep in her bed. Kaiwin agreed without hesitation. Come to think of it, he has never refused my requests. The only exception was the child, thought Elena, looking at her husband. "Is there something wrong with my face?" asked Kaiwin without opening his eyes. Elena answered him that she just liked looking at him. "And please tell me why you had a fever that day. Did you have any pain? And about that night, I'll behave more carefully next time and not climb a tree. I once had a high fever too, so I can guess how you're feeling. As an apology, let me take care of you instead of Ben. It makes me want to be by your side and change the cold towels on your forehead." "I'll look forward to having a high fever again," said Kaiwin, which made the girl extremely happy. It took Elena a very long time to fall asleep. The girl turned towards her husband. He was sleeping soundly. Elena noticed that Kaiwin likes shirts very much. He even sleeps in them. The girl doubted that he was comfortable. She hoped the day would come soon when the Duke would stop being embarrassed by her. Returning home in the evening, Thomas saw a girl sitting alone in an alleyway. "Mr. Knight, please help me. I have twisted my ankle. Could you walk me to the main road?" the girl asked. "Of course," replied Thomas and held out his hand to the girl. Suddenly he saw the girl pull out a dagger. Abruptly jumping to her feet, the girl tried to plunge the dagger into Thomas's stomach. Thomas managed to intercept the girl's arm. The dagger fell to the sidewalk with a clang. A man in a cap jumped out from around the corner and ran away. Thomas took his boot off his foot and launched it at the fleeing man. With a loud scream, the man fell to the ground. The girl fainted from the stress she had been under. Thomas picked her up and walked over to the man and pinned him to the ground with his foot. Thomas demanded of the man that he tell him his name. "Don't you remember me? You're the reason I was sentenced to 5 years in prison," the man hissed through his teeth. 5 years? That's probably the thief I caught in my town," recalled Thomas. "How could you dodge a punch? I know for a fact you would never expect a threat from a woman," shouted the man. The guard who approached him taped his mouth shut. Thomas ordered the guard to take the man to jail. His mother always told Thomas that he should protect the girls. She repeated to him that girls are less strong, so they need to be protected. For this reason, Thomas always thought women were weak. But looking at the Duchess, Thomas doubted that all women are weak. Because the Duchess regularly showed her character, Thomas became more considerate of women. He no longer considered them weak. That was why he noticed the dagger in time. In the hallway, Elena ran into Ben. The manager told her that since morning, Thomas had been walking around the house, asking everyone to apologize for his behavior. Ben was pleased that the feckless Thomas had finally grown up. At breakfast, the Duke told his wife that Incan Marjong had lost all power. He was kicked out of secular society. The Viscount's life as a nobleman was over forever. Senior Viscount Marjong himself ordered his son to be arrested. Viscount Marjong ordered his son to be imprisoned for life. I have personally seen the letter that says that Incan is forbidden to leave the confines of your house. He will most likely spend the rest of his days recuperating his health. The letter also spoke of compensation. In exchange for the pardon, they promised to deliver free medicine for the Duchess for the next 50 years. However, I plan to change my supplier. What about the medicine the Viscount gave the girls? Did you find the ingredients? Elena asked. We still can't recognize them. We've summoned all the experts in the Empire, but they still can't figure out what's in those medicines, replied the Duke. If I remember correctly, you said that the Viscount used animal blood in his medicine, but I think that is utterly absurd, for there is no such animal that can make a woman conceive from herself, mumbled Helena. Since the Viscount didn't even open his mouth during the torture, I believe he used forbidden materials. When this becomes known, he will definitely be in trouble. If this material is so hard to get, then maybe I'm getting myself worked up for nothing? Elena thought to herself. She was very afraid that someone else would be able to create a similar drug and would also experiment on people. As soon as we identify all the ingredients, I'll let you know immediately, Kaiwin promised. The maid wanted to put a new dish on the table, but she slipped and accidentally dropped it from her hands. The fried chicken and cheese sauce flew straight at Helena. The Duke pushed the plate of food away from his wife with a sharp movement. The cheese sauce doused the Duke's shirt. "I apologize," the maid mumbled stammeringly. The Duke asked in a calm voice for the maid to bring him a clean towel. With the towel she brought, the Duke wiped the sauce off his hand. "By the way, Elena, what did you want to tell me?" asked the Duke, sitting down in his chair again. Elena told him that she had some plans and she wanted the Duke to set aside a day for her. "All right, I'll always make time for you," Kaiwin replied to the girl. Elena noted to herself that her husband had become a little kinder. "Madam, I apologize for what happened in the dining room," said the maid to Elena after breakfast. "Don't dwell on it, it's fine. On the contrary, this situation even amused me," said Elena and patted the maid on her back. Entering her room, Elena noticed a letter from Rosalind on her desk. The girl was very curious how Elena's relationship was going. Elena decided to write her friend a letter. She had a lot to tell. She boasted that she was already on the 4th stage of the relationship. Elena hoped that soon enough she would have no problem touching her husband. Manager Ben approached the Duchess's room and knocked gently. There was silence behind the door. Ben decided to cautiously peek into the room. In the room, he saw the Duchess sleeping at her desk. Hearing footsteps, the girl opened her eyes. "Madam, have you been studying here all night? I had already decided that you had fainted," Ben exclaimed. Among the papers scattered on the desk and on the floor, Ben found an invitation to the festival. The 4th step in the relationship was to create memories together. Elena thought for a long time about where she should go. There was to be a festival in the next few days. It would add vivid memories, but the downside was that the festival was crowded. Elena was also thinking about calling her spouse to go boating. In that case, it was possible to spend time alone. The downside was that the memories were too faded. Elena couldn't choose anything, as the future of humanity and her relationship with her husband depended on her choice. On top of that, this was their first date. Elena really wanted to be alone with the Duke, so she was thinking of going boating. Come to think of it, the Duke has never been to festivals. People who are already dead wouldn't let him go out. They made excuses, saying the young gentleman was sick, narrated Ben. "Ben, I thought you told me you have a mage, you know. Would you mind inviting him here? I want to seek his help. With magic, we can get to the festival in a few hours," said Elena. Since the mage refused to go to the manor, Elena had to go to the magic tower. Just as Elena approached the magic tower, a blonde-haired man descended from somewhere in the sky. He ended up right in front of Elena. The blonde-haired man greeted Elena and introduced himself as Kedrian. "And how am I supposed to address him? I mean, he's the head of the magic tower. I can't disrespect him," Elena thought to herself. "If you don't mind, I'll call you the head of the Black Tower," said the girl. Elena knew that although the Black Tower was located within the imperial palace, it didn't mean that its servants were subordinate to the emperor. They were independent. "To be honest, I've never been called that before, so I'm afraid I'll feel awkward. I'm usually called Mr. or Mr. Kedrian. Now you've confused me altogether. If I call you master, it would be like a servant addressing his master. And if I call you Mr. Kedrian, that would be too long. If I call you by your first name only, it sounds informal. I and your husband Duke are good friends, so I will allow you to just call me by my first name," said the mage. The situation was beginning to annoy him. "Well, you're not my friend, are you? And I should be more polite to you. By the way, do you know why I asked to meet you, head of the Black Tower?" Elena said thoughtfully. "I've been told that you want teleportation magic. You want a path that takes 2 days to travel in just a few hours. That is not a problem for me. Are you setting off today?" Kedrian asked. "No, wait. I met with you today to talk about departure time and payment, replied Elena. The head of the Black Tower replied to the girl that he would help her any time and he would not charge her any money. If I were interested in money, I would send one of my mages to you. In fact, I only want to help my best friend, so you don't have to worry about payment. Over dinner, Elena told her husband that she had asked the head of the Black Tower for help. Kedrian asked his spouse if Kedrian had acted rude to her. No, he was quite polite to me. Could it be because I am your consort? Come to think of it, that mage said he was very close to you. He called himself your best friend. When did you get close? Helena asked. The Duke promised his consort that he would definitely tell her about his friendship with Kedrian. Only a little later. The long-awaited day of the festival had arrived. Elena decided to wear a dress with open shoulders. You are simply dazzling today. You look like the truest fairy, the maids exclaimed. Elena did spend a lot more time getting ready than usual, as this day was special, her first date with her husband. Since it was a masquerade ball, Elena was forced to wear a mask. The Duke walked into Elena's room. "And how do I look?" asked Elena to her husband. The Duke replied to the girl that she was unusually beautiful today. Are you not excited at all? Last time I asked you to praise me, you had a lot of trouble doing so. Now you're acting completely different, noted the girl. Then was the first time I complimented someone, so I acted like it, replied the Duke. Haven't you ever met someone you found attractive before? Haven't you ever felt like complimenting anyone? Helena asked, surprised. Was she really the first person to hear a compliment from the Duke? Kedrian, have you ever said anything insincere to me, including this moment? Asked the girl. No, I always try to be honest with you, answered Kedrian. Well, since that's the case, let's hurry up, or the head of the Black Tower is probably waiting for us, said Elena and hurried out into the hall. Grand Duke, I apologize, but there is something here that requires your immediate intervention. Manager Ben looked out into the hall. If you'll excuse me, I'll be right back, said the Duke and disappeared behind the doors of his office. I spoke with my husband the other day regarding you. He told me that you were a priest before you became a mage. You've been friends for several years now, said Elena to the head of the Black Tower. And what else did Kedrian tell you about me? Asked the mage with a smirk. Why are you wearing a white robe? Is it because you used to be a priest? Elena ignored Kedrian's question. She wanted to know as much as she could about this mage. After all, he was her husband's best friend. No, I only wear this robe because it fits me well, replied Kedrian. But when you're wearing the white robe, it gives the impression that you're the head of the White Tower, not the Black Tower, mumbled Elena. The Duke came out into the hall. He asked to be excused for their having to wait. As Elena had expected, there were many people at the festival. There was noise everywhere, the clamor of fruit vendors. The festival is big. There are a lot of people here. We might get lost if we just walk side by side, said Elena. Hearing her spouse's words, the Duke immediately extended his hand to her. Elena took her husband's hand. The girl noted to herself that the level of touch was also passed. I learned that this is your first time at the festival. Have you noticed that since you met me, you have learned a lot of new things? There will be even more such pleasant moments in the future. Helena promised her husband. Kedrian, look at that colorful man. Not only does he have an interesting mask on his face, but he's wearing some rather unusual clothes, Elena exclaimed, pointing her finger at the brightly dressed man. Just imagine how uncomfortable he is in those clothes. I wonder if his sword is real. No, it's a fake sword. It looks very light and probably doesn't even weigh half of a real sword, said Kedrian. Wait, you can draw such conclusions after barely looking at the sword? Marveled Elena. A man standing in the middle of the square shouted loudly that he would give an extremely valuable prize to the one who could chop a log with a single blow. Kedrian, let's try to chop the log, suggested Elena to her husband. Elena gave the man some coins for participating in the contest. Now I will bring you a sword with which to chop the log, said the man and disappeared around the corner. Elena was afraid that the man might bring a blunt or extremely fragile sword that would not be used to split the log. You will need this particular sword to chop the log. The man held out a small sword to the Duke. I assure you, you will indeed have trouble, but not only with the sword, but also with the log. Then I'll also charge you for the broken sword. The man thought gloatingly to himself. Suddenly, a huge lion jumped into the square. People screamed and scattered. The man looked fearfully at the sword in the Duke's hands. He began to regret giving him the fake sword. Duke jumped into the air and struck the lion with the fake sword right in the head. Are you okay? Asked Kywin to his consort. Helena answered him that she was absolutely fine. She didn't even have time to be scared. I can't believe that a lion escaped from the circus. It's good that no one was hurt. He was so big. I thought lions were smaller, Elena said thoughtfully. Kywin, you know what? I always trust that you will definitely come to my rescue. I think my trust in you is boundless, and it makes me feel warm at heart. So you trust me too, okay? Suddenly, Elena heard some sort of angry shouting. A woman in a red dress was reprimanding a young guy. I'm sorry, it's just that customer came before you, mumbled the guy. And what was it you were doing if you didn't ignore me? How dare you act like that? Shouted the woman and swung her hand. The woman was stopped by a long-haired man who approached. Calm down. I don't want others to see you like this. Please be angry only with me, my mademoiselle. The man kissed the hand of the woman in the red dress. Shall we find another artist to capture your beauty? The man suggested. Who is this man? From the sound of his voice, he's quite young. It's a shame he's wasting his time on a woman like that, whispered the ladies passing by. Who is this other good man? I saw that he was around from the beginning and could have ended things even earlier. He only wants to seem nice, but he isn't. Elena thought to herself. Elena, it's you, isn't it? It's been so long since I've seen you. I'm glad to meet you here. Suddenly, a long-haired man shouted. Elena froze in surprise. She didn't remember him. Okay, I'll see you again. I'm busy today, so bye. The long-haired man put his arm around the woman in the red dress and led the way. Did that man just call that girl Elena? Does he mean she's a duchess? People started whispering. We should get out of here, too, Elena exclaimed and dragged her husband behind her. This couldn't be worse. And just why did that asshole call me by my first name? He ruined my whole evening. I wanted to hang out with my husband some more, and now I have to go home. Irritated, Elena thought to herself. If we stay at the festival, there's a good chance that Kywin will be recognized by some aristocrat. And I don't know that long-haired man, but I won't just leave it at that. And I'll find out who he is. Let's go to the theater. I'm sure we won't be disturbed there. Kywin pointed with his hand toward a large, dark, brown tent. The Duke took his consort by the hand and led her toward the tent. The girl was surprised that he was the first to take the initiative. The theater was showing a play where the handsome prince was rescuing a young princess. The actors played very well. I must meet the man who wrote the script for this play, mumbled Elena as the curtain came down. Elena approached the actors and tried to ask them the author of the script. Unfortunately, no one knew who it was. The actors gave Elena the script and asked her to refer to Baron Afron. Most likely, a young minstrel wrote the script. He is currently absent, and I don't know when he will return. I will send men to track him down as soon as possible. Baron Afron promised. While you wait for the minstrel, I will provide you with a room to rest. There you can stay as long as you wish. Kywin, forgive me for wasting your precious time on personal whims, said Elena when she and her husband were alone. It's all right. Are you okay? Why did you look so pale at that play? Asked Kywin. I'm fine. I'm just a little surprised because I thought I knew the person who wrote the script, and I think it's a close buddy of mine that I'm very familiar with. Elena replied. That script could have been written by that old lady. In the play, everything happened exactly as it did in my prophetic dream. What if someone else knows about the future besides me? Suddenly the old woman showed someone else what awaits us ahead? The girl thought to herself. Elena offered her husband to drink some wine before going to bed. She promised that she wouldn't pester him. At the moment, I care about that the least. I'm more worried about you. You look in extremely poor health, replied the Duke. That's all excuses. Have some wine with me. I don't ask much from you, Elena insisted. Kedrian sipped some wine. Elena, I wouldn't advise you to drink wine, as it has a rather peculiar taste. You'll be hot soon, so don't be surprised. Kedrian opened the window wide open. What are you talking about now? I'm sitting here in just my nightgown. I can't be hot, Elena exclaimed. A moment later, Elena realized that even though the window was open wide, she felt absolutely no cold. Her body began to burn. Wait, what's going on now? Are you telling me that something was put in our wine? Wondered Elena. You'd better not move for a while or you'll get very dizzy. The Duke walked over to his consort and held her tightly against him. The Duke lifted his consort into his arms and carried her to bed. Kedrian, how did you realize that something was put in the wine? Helena asked. I determined it by the taste. I've had to taste something like that before in my time, replied the Duke. I once had to stay at another estate because of work. The lord of those lands offered me a drink. Fortunately, various medicinal substances like that don't have much effect on me, so nothing happened to me. Kedrian, my body is burning right now and my head is very dizzy. Do you think I'm being affected by that substance in this way? Elena clarified. Yes, that's usually what one experiences after a substance of that nature. Usually the effects of the substance wear off after a few hours. You just need to be patient, replied the Duke. Well, I'll have to be patient since there are no other options. My husband isn't the kind of man who enjoys watching other people suffer. If he knew a way to get rid of these symptoms, he would definitely help me. Elena thought to herself. Okay, stop. How did I know that? When did I realize what my husband is? I know about his skills. I know his character and manner of speaking. But is that who he really is? Maybe I'm just making up the perfect husband for myself? Kedrian, I'm really hot right now. I decided to take off my shirt, said Elena to her husband. The Duke walked over to the window and ripped the curtain off. You can't take your clothes off since the room is cold, but you don't feel it. I don't want you to get sick, said the Duke to the girl. A moment later, Elena was wrapped in the curtain like a baby. The curtain is thinner than a blanket, so you won't be as hot, said Kedrian. Elena asked her to untie it, but the Duke refused her. If you don't want to untie me, then release at least one of my hands, Elena asked. The Duke helped her free her hand. Yep, gotcha, Elena shouted, grabbing her husband's hand. Kedrian, have you ever thought about what would happen if the world collapsed? I would be very upset about that. It would be a shame if the world ended and the gods fell. You might die, and I absolutely hate that. You know what? Just recently I've realized that you're a wonderful person. I need you very much. Tell me, what am I to you? Do you even need me? Elena asked. I don't know the answers to those questions, replied the Duke. In the morning, Elena woke up rested and full of energy. She didn't remember when she fell asleep. Kedrian refused to say anything about the previous evening. I'm so sorry. That wine was for me. The new maid just made a mistake, shouted the Baron and hit his head on the floor with all his might. Okay, calm down. Don't beat yourself up, asked Elena. By the way, that minstrel you were looking for is already here, said the Baron. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Vil, exclaimed a young pretty girl. I heard that you wrote this script. Is it true? Have you seen the future? Do you know the old woman too? Asked Elena to the girl. I don't know any old woman. I saw all these things in scraps in my dreams, Vile told. The girl narrated that in her dreams, she saw a ruined kingdom that was filled with monsters. The corpses of people littered the streets. Does anyone else know about your prophetic dreams? Elena asked. I try not to tell anyone about it, as I'm afraid they just won't believe me. The only one who knows about my dreams is my friend. You're the first one to believe me, Vile replied. I have one favor to ask of you. Could you and I exchange letters periodically? You are the only person who would know the future as well as I do, said Elena. Of course, I would love to write you letters. Since I don't have a permanent residence at the moment, I'll be the first to send you a letter. Promised Vile. Well, why did this have to happen to me in the first place? Incan was indignant. Look at what I brought. This vial has my father's signature on it. How nice that you will be remembered young, said Rebecca, and showed Incan a small vial of bright red liquid. What are you talking about now? I'm not going to die anytime soon. I'm pretty sure that in just a little while I'll be perfectly healthy, shouted Incan. He had a plan to get out of his confinement. Elena decided to draw a portrait of her husband. Have you heard the news? Word is that Baron Afrin's wine cellar has burned down, Elena said to her husband. I was told about it, Kywin replied. I'm going to tell you something now, and don't be too surprised by it. I didn't like the blue paint, so I used a different color. I also didn't paint the mark, but I put all my love into this painting, Elena confessed. Elena held out the portrait she had painted to her husband. You mean this is what I look like? Kywin asked. Yes, you look like that, but you don't have pink eyes, you have blue eyes. Since I didn't like the color of the blue paint, I used pink. But even so, you look really good. A real looker. Elena replied. Do you think if we ever have a son, will he look like this portrait? When I look at this drawing, I feel like there's a little bit of both of us in here. Okay, let's drop the subject of children. You've already noticed that I can draw, and I want to teach you to do the same. So I propose we have classes twice a week. Yes, of course, I'll take lessons with you, replied the Duke. Do you happen to know a place that sells good blue paints? I need the color of the sea, said Elena. The maid told her that she had seen several stores with paints in the market square. Elena took the maid and Thomas with her and went to the market square. Unfortunately, the right paint could not be found. After walking around the market square some more, Elena decided to go in search of a pastry shop. Near the candy store, Elena saw a group of kids who were bullying a girl named Anna. Thomas grabbed one of the bullies by the scruff of the neck and lifted him high off the ground. Anna, are you okay? Elena asked, taking a seat next to the girl. Who are you? Are you an angel? Asked a surprised Anna. Yes, you're right. I am an angel. I came here to punish these naughty children, replied Elena. Forgive us. We won't do it again, shouted the children with loud sobs. It's not me you should apologize to. It's the one you hurt. Shouting over the crying children, Elena said. She took the boys' hands and led them over to Anna. We are sorry, Anna, said the crying children. Anna, where's your mom? Asked Elena to the girl. She held out her hand and helped her up from the ground. My mom is coming home very late. I was going to wait for her at home, but I really wanted to eat some chocolate, the girl confessed. I don't have any chocolate with me, but I have some cookies. And I'll share some with you if you don't tell anyone that I'm an angel who came down from heaven, said Elena. Anna promised to keep quiet. Very delicious, and I would like to share these cookies with Hans. He and I do everything together, and we also promised each other that we will definitely get married in the future, Anna told. There you are! I've been looking for you for hours, shouted Hans, who ran up. It's true Hans and Anna are from a prophetic dream. If I don't do anything, they'll die too, Elena thought wistfully. In the evening, Ben told Elena that Anna and Hans were children who had been supported by the duchy for over 3 months now. Their families had traveled to the mountains in search of a better life. Their fathers died there after encountering monsters. The children were lucky enough to meet a duke who took them under his protection. He decided to support the children until they came of age. Anna and Hans's mothers learned from herbalists. The Duke planned to open a center to help poor people, where they would give out medicinal herbs for free. Do you want to hire Anna and Hans' mothers to volunteer at the center? Elena clarified. Yes, of course, and we will pay them for their work. When those two take over, everything goes smoothly. The only downside is that they are immigrants. I'd like to point out that more than half of the people of the duchy are immigrants who arrived at different times, replied Ben. If people start to resent it, we'll have to postpone the opening of the volunteer center for a while. People have different attitudes toward immigrants. Answer me, where did Incan go? Rebecca asked the servant. He went to Duke Mahad's estate, replied the servant. That idiot dared to go against me after all, mumbled Rebecca. Anne, will you come with me? We need to buy some dark dresses, said Rebecca to her maid. Madam, it is a beautiful day. Would you like to take a walk outside the mansion? Asked Elena, a knight named Cholan. It's good that you approached me after all. I was just about to go shopping, replied Elena. Elena decided to wear the earrings given by the head of the Dark Tower. Not only could they change color, but they also had magical powers. Elena decided to take Anna along for the walk. Suddenly, a woman ran up to Cholan and shouted loudly that her village was being attacked by monsters. The villagers really needed the knight's help. Has it really started? How could monsters get into the duchy territory? Thought Elena. Madam, shall I go? Can you manage without me? Asked Elena Cholan. Yes, of course go. I'll wait for you here, replied Elena. Anna, don't be afraid of anything. The knights will sort it out completely. Elena realized that in her case, it was extremely dangerous to send her knight away, but she couldn't do otherwise. If she kept her knight with her, people would stop believing in the Duke. Elena took off one earring and gave it to Anna. She asked the girl to take the earring to the Duke and tell him that it was from his consort. The situation with the monsters seemed extremely suspicious to Elena. Long time no see, Duchess, whispered the approaching Incan. Incan's guards immediately approached Elena's maid and stunned her. Duchess, I don't want to harm peaceful people, so try not to cross me. I want to assure you that I will not harm you in any way. I just want to have a little chat with you, said Incan. Elena noticed that there was some foreign odor in Incan's carriage. The odor started to make Elena feel sick. I heard he was locked up in his own house for life. Why the hell is he causing trouble here? As soon as the earring with the tracking magic is in my husband's hands, he'll start looking for me right away. I hope Anna is up to the task. Elena thought. Stop the carriage or I'll throw up right here. I'll ruin the whole parlor for you, screamed Elena. Incan ordered the coachman to stop the carriage. Climbing out, Elena fell to her knees and began gulping for air with her mouth. I hate to knock you out, but if you keep this up, I'm going to have to do something about it, said Incan to the girl. Give me something cold to drink and I'll feel better immediately. Gritted through her teeth, Helena gritted her teeth. Look, there's an inn nearby. There's bound to be cold drinks there. Elena pointed a finger at the sign. You probably don't realize the situation you're in, Incan muttered. Fine. I'll buy you a cold drink if you promise to behave and keep this on. Incan put his cloak on the girl. Elena noticed that the fingers of his hands had turned black. But what had caused this? Why did they suddenly change color? Elena noticed that there was also a rather unpleasant odor coming from the cloak. I'll give 1,000 gold pieces to whoever catches that blonde boy and ties him up, yelled Elena, and pointed her finger at Incan. The girl knew that for 1,000 gold pieces, an ordinary mercenary could live comfortably for a whole month. You will get the money later. The guarantee is my noble name and this brooch. The mercenaries grabbed their swords and axes and rushed at Incan. With a kick of his foot, Incan sent 2 of the mercenaries to the far corner. A few seconds later, a couple more mercenaries flew off to the side. Seeing all of this, Elena was stunned. She hadn't expected Incan to be so quick. Duchess, I thought that once I gained power, I would go to another country and live happily ever after. But for some reason, I can't get you out of my mind. Maybe it's revenge. I want to make you pay for what happened, said Incan. When I saw you in the square today, I realized that I fell in love with you. I can't leave you now. It was you who got me into this. Elena clutched her eyes tightly and pushed Incan away from you. Incan flew a few meters and hit his back on the bar. Elena looked at her hands in surprise. She hadn't expected herself to be hit like that. And where did she get so much strength from? Elena jumped out of the tavern and ran towards the forest. It was her first time in this area, so she was a little confused. She needed to find the guardsmen as soon as possible. A while later, Incan still managed to catch up with the girl. He gripped tightly into her hair. Duchess, what have you done? Do you have a disposable artifact hidden somewhere? Incan asked. Let me go, wailed the girl frantically. "It's finally gotten to me. You're just afraid of me, am I right? But you wanted me dead, didn't you? Behave, and we'll both benefit. I won't kill you, don't worry," said Incan. Incan threw Elena to the ground and started choking her. Gaining a lungful of air, Elena called her husband by name. A short while later, Incan's grip loosened. When Elena opened her eyes, she saw Incan's twisted face in front of her. Next to his throat was the Duke's long dagger. Seeing her husband, Elena was relieved and immediately lost consciousness. Elena woke up in a bright room. In the middle of the room was a wooden chair with an old woman sitting on it. The first stage of awakening is complete. The conditions have been met, so it is not surprising that the awakening happened now. "I want to warn you that a turning point is beginning," said the old woman. "I apologize, but I have absolutely no idea what you are telling me right now," mumbled Elena. "And you don't need to understand anything. You'll forget everything as soon as you wake up. Everyone creates their own destiny. I chose my path once too, and I've already helped you too much. Because of that, there may be a discord between your destiny and this world. I will no longer interfere with your destiny. Act on your own. Choose what is more important to you, your destiny or the destiny of this world." The old woman placed her palm on Elena's head. "We've already lost once, but now with my intervention, things can change. I hope you can prevent the demise of humanity. May your child's sacrifice not be in vain. Madame has probably fainted from the exertion. I am sure she will wake up soon," said the maid who had been assigned to monitor the Duchess's condition. "Is there any injury to her body?" asked the Duke. "The bruise on her neck will go away within a few days. Otherwise, the Duchess is in good health," replied the maid. Bowing low to the Duke, she left the Duchess's room. Kaiwin took his consort's hand and put it to his face. He was afraid of losing her as well. Kaiwin's entire life was filled with unpleasant moments. His mother didn't like him because he was born with a spot on his face. Luckily, Kaiwin was born quite smart and was already able to recognize lies and truth at the age of 2. When his younger brother Martin was born, his parents forgot about Kaiwin. They loved their youngest son very much. A few years later, a rumor went around the kingdom that the mark on Kaiwin's face was left by the devil himself. People even found evidence of this in an ancient book. Kaiwin's mother was very upset when she heard about the rumors about her son's birthmark. That day, the Duchess decided to get rid of her son's mark with fire. Unfortunately, the mark would not burn. It was immune to flame. Kaiwin decided to show his face to his parents as little as possible. He spent a lot of time on the training ground, perfecting his sword skills. When Kaiwin turned 16, his parents and brother were killed in a traffic accident. People began to whisper that Kaiwin's curse had killed his relatives. At first it upset the boy, but then he got used to the gossip and stopped reacting to it. Kaiwin became indifferent to absolutely everything. He was even indifferent to the fact that his bride was replaced at the last moment. When Kaiwin first saw Elena, she seemed like a rabbit to him. He thought their relationship would be a pure formality, but the more he got to know his wife, the harder it was for him to understand her. Elena chastised all the people who chatted behind the Duke's back. She touched him without disgust, and even asked to sleep together. Kedrian got used to his consort very quickly. He showed her his back and told her about the past. After that, his memories were no longer as heavy as before. Kaiwin appreciated his spouse for being kind, sincere, and always interesting to be with. But when she asked him if he needed her, he couldn't find anything to say. Does he need her? What would happen if she left? Kaiwin had always done well with his problems and daily chores. So does he need a wife? When Kaiwin saw his wife's earring in the little girl's hands, he immediately realized that something had happened to Elena. Kaiwin rushed to the head of the Dark Tower. Kedrian was unable to track down Elena immediately, as he was hindered by a strange energy of unknown origin. When Elena was finally found, the Duke immediately went to her aid. As Kaiwin carried Elena home, he realized that he needed her. "Kaiwin, what's going on?" Elena asked, opening her eyes. "Elena, do you remember the question you asked me the other day?" You asked if I needed you, and I'm going to answer you. Elena, I need you. So please always be there for me, Kaiwin asked. Good morning, mistress. How are you feeling? How did you sleep? Asked a doctor named Dagder to the girl. The Duke asked him to have him examine his consort. There is nothing wrong with me. The only thing is that lately I've been bothered by nightmares, tinnitus, and hallucinations, Elena replied. Elena didn't understand what was happening to her lately. It had been 4 days since the kidnapping, but there was no way she could come to her senses. Elena often had dreams in which she saw a ruined city. In it, monsters were skinning people who were still alive. How's your bruise on your neck? The doctor asked. It's fine. It doesn't hurt as much anymore. There is some discomfort only when touched. The ointment you prescribed helped me, Elena replied. After lunch, her husband came to Elena's house. He brought her some peaches. For the last few days, Kaiwin had been bringing her fruit and cutting it into small slices. Elena enjoyed watching the Duke wield the knife. What kind of fruit will you bring me tomorrow? Elena asked. I don't know, I haven't thought about it yet, admitted the Duke. The next day, Ben revealed that Incan's body was missing. That day, Incan was struck by the Duke's sword and died instantly. He was punished without trial. The body was removed from the duchy. Opinion was divided on what to do with him. 2 days ago, it was decided to send the body to Vanson for trial. Even though Incan was already dead, he was given the punishment of beheading. The Duke was allowed to officially reveal all of Incan's sins in great detail. Yesterday morning, the carriage with Incan's body and the witness traveled to the imperial castle. It is said that that is where the body went missing. There is an eyewitness who said that he personally saw the body disappear. Narrated Ben. According to the eyewitness, the body suddenly melted and disappeared before his eyes. The eyewitness claims he was completely sober. What's also strange is that Incan's clothes were still intact. So it appears that someone took off Incan's clothes and took the body? Elena said thoughtfully. There's a rumor going around the capital that Incan was into black magic when he was alive. There is talk that this is why his body disappeared, said Ben. Ben, what do you think about that? Is the body really disappeared because Incan studied black magic? Elena didn't want to believe that there was evil magic involved, which is a big sin. I don't know. I think it will be easier to give an answer when the investigation is over. We'll be sure to let you know as soon as the situation becomes clearer, Ben promised. If Incan really did study black magic, then it makes sense to me why he gave off that unmistakable foul odor. I've seen his immense power myself. He easily took out 10 men in a few minutes, Elena thought. I also saw his blackened hands, though he looked completely normal. But Incan ran into the monster and was seriously injured. It is said that parts of his body were torn off. But could he recover? What if magic was really used? What about me? I was able to push him back a few meters back then. Where did I get that power from? I definitely saw my hands enveloped in light, and when I used them to push Incan, he flew far away. Although it's hard to believe, it's true. Apparently it was a power opposite to Incan's. After that day, the light in my hands never appeared again. I wonder if this power only worked against Incan, or if I would be able to use it in some other situation. Mistress, the Duke has offered to dine with him tonight, said the maid who entered. Tell him that I will gladly dine with him, Helena exclaimed joyfully. Rebecca heard a knock on the window. A carrier pigeon had flown in. Rebecca opened the window, letting the bird in. A small note was taped to the pigeon's paw. Rebecca untied the note and splashed some white wine on it. Words immediately appeared on the note. The man wrote that he had failed to track the object, but had succeeded in disposing of the body. This whole thing annoys me, Rebecca muttered and tossed the note into the fireplace. Who knew they wouldn't be able to catch up with Incan? Had to dispose of the body, even though I didn't want to. I wonder if the Duchess noticed anything suspicious about him. I can't let my guard down now, for you never know when, where, or how doubt will blossom. It would have been nice if we turned out a little faster. I even had time to buy some special morning clothes. And since the Duchess wasn't killed after all, I have nowhere to wear this dress now. Oh no, I think I'll still need it. A startled maid ran into the room. She announced loudly that Rebecca wanted to see her father. Rebecca. And what are you going to do about it? If you hadn't offered to lock Incan up in the manor for the rest of his life, would this have happened? The Viscount asked his daughter. I'm sure that Incan only committed this madness because he was cornered. To be honest, I would never have thought that brainless jerk would do something like that. And if it wasn't for you, it would have been fine. Calm down, Father. I don't understand why you're so nervous. Nothing extraordinary has happened, Rebecca said in a tired voice. She herself wasn't thrilled that now she would have to deal with the problems Incan had created. You speak so calmly, as if you don't realize what's going on. Do you think Duke Mayhad will let this matter go unheeded? He must think our family knew of Incan's intentions but kept silent. Shaking with anger, the Viscount shouted. He can't help but retaliate. This is quite different from last time, when only a few maids were hurt. How could you dare to kidnap the Duke's wife? We're bound to be pressured and put out of business and put our family out of business. Father, calm down and shut up already at last. It's so noisy here that my bones are even ringing. Stop barking and shut your mouth, shouted Rebecca. What did you just say? Rebecca, how on earth do you talk to your father? The Viscount jumped up from his seat and walked over to his daughter. The red stone pendant hanging on Rebecca's chest glowed with a bright light. Seeing the bright light of the pendant, the Viscount immediately became numb. His entire body became paralyzed. Father, remain calm and keep quiet about this situation. Go back and sit back in your seat. I won't let Duke Mayhad consider you as Incan's accomplice, so you don't have to worry about it, said Rebecca. The Viscount silently turned around and wandered to his desk. All right. The problem with my father has already been solved. Now I will start with what should have been done yesterday. I'll get rid of the Duke's wife when I get the chance. Rebecca walked out of her father's study and wandered to her room. Strange. Why is there no reply? Helena muttered in surprise. Immediately after the kidnapping, the girl wrote a couple of letters. The first she sent to her family in the capital, the second to the residence of Count Max, where Rosalind lived. The reply came the same day only from Count Max's residence. The letter stated that Rosalind was currently absent, so she wouldn't be able to write a reply. Although my hometown is far away with great desire, a letter can be delivered within a day. One only needs to use a well-trained carrier pigeon to do so. Then why is there no reply coming? Thought Elena. All right, I'll wait a little longer and get on with the matter. For the moment, I have to think about another date with my husband. This time, I want to invite him to go boating. It's unlikely he'll refuse me. I think of that kiss over and over again. It was tender and affectionate. The kiss was like the oath of a knight who has decided to dedicate his whole life to his mistress. That means he'll never divorce me. I wonder what the progress of our relationship is. We're probably halfway to something more serious. No, I shouldn't dwell on that. It's time to do something or we'll stay at this stage. In the hallway, Elena ran into the maid Mina. She was the one who had been with Elena the day she was kidnapped by Incan. Mina was found unconscious in a deserted area. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries or consequences. Mina had already recovered from the incident and went to work. I would have gone to work even earlier, but everyone insisted that I rest in bed for a few days. I feel fine, but I don't know how Sir Cholan is doing. What happened to him? Mina asked. I'm worried about him, so I keep asking others about his well-being. From what I've heard, there's not a living spot on Sir Cholan's face. Helena asked Knights Thomas and Mark to tell her in detail what had happened to Cholan. We swear to you that we are not to blame for what happened. It happened so unexpectedly that even we went into a stupor. We couldn't stop him. The knights exclaimed, falling to their knees before Elena. Cholan has a mild temperament. He's a quiet man who won't get into a fight for no reason. Cholan can be called a strong knight. He belongs to the elite that participated in the monster sweep 8 years ago. We knew that someone beat him up, but he won't tell us who did it. Some say that he beat up his own face. "And how could he beat himself up?" asked Elena in a surprised voice. "Elena, is something wrong? You look extremely upset today," noted Kaiwin. "I found out the reason why Cholin's face is broken. Ben told me that the entire time I was unconscious, Cholan was kneeling in front of my chambers. I have absolutely no idea why I didn't guess that he might feel guilty," Elena replied. "Kaiwin, how should I handle this situation? If I tell him that it's not his fault what happened, will he stop berating himself?" "It would be better if you come up with a punishment for him," Kaiwin replied. "Punishment? But it's not like I think he's guilty. Why would I want to punish him?" asked the girl. "You're the one who doesn't think he's guilty, and he has a completely different opinion on the matter. If you punish him, you will thus give him an opportunity to pay for his mistake. That way, he'll come to his senses sooner," explained the Duke. Kaiwin held out apple slices carved in the shape of rabbits to his consort. "Duke, since when did you start liking rabbits?" Helena asked in a flirtatious voice. "I've always liked them, and now I like them even more," Kaiwin admitted. Elena called Cholan over to her. His face was truly in a terrible state. It even seemed to the girl that more wounds had risen overnight. "Sir Cholan, can you guess why I called you over?" Elena asked in a stern voice. She was doing as her husband advised her. "You called me to punish me for my disrespectful behavior," replied Cholan. "You went out with me as my escort a few days ago and failed in your duty. Do you agree with that?" asked Elena. "Yes, I agree with that," mumbled Cholan. "Then take responsibility for that incident and accept the punishment. You will be my personal escort for 6 months, but without pay. Consider yourself a volunteer from now on," said Elena. "Every time I leave the estate, you will have to accompany me unconditionally, and you have no choice. You know very well yourself that punishment is not chosen by the one who receives it." Elena saw tears streaming down the knight's cheeks. She really wanted to hug him and comfort him, but had to force herself to refrain. Kedrian had advised her to be tougher on Cholan. "Thank you, madam, for giving me another chance. Even though I'm not good enough, but still you gave me this opportunity. I promise to protect you even at the cost of my own life. I won't let you get hurt once more." That day, Cholan himself suggested that the Duchess go out into the city. He did so to keep up with the other knights. Mark and Thomas often bragged about accompanying the Duchess on her travels. Cholan also wanted to be the Duchess's escort. After what had happened, Cholan was constantly tormented by guilt. If he hadn't suggested that the Duchess leave the house, then nothing would have happened. While beating himself up, Cholan would punch himself in the face with his fist. When he felt the pain, he felt better. Cholan avoided the Duchess, as seeing the scarf around her neck would make him feel guilty again. He knew that the silk scarf hid the bruises left by Incan. A few hours later, Ben reported to Helena that the Mahjong family's butler had died unexpectedly. It was rumored to be a suicide. It was also learned that Incan had been secretly studying black magic. His sister Rebecca found out about it a few years ago. After that, the girl began to be persecuted by the followers of black magic. Rebecca kept silent because she was afraid that if the truth became known to the public, the family's honor would be tarnished. After her brother's death, Rebecca revealed all the insults and threats against her. That same day, the butler hanged himself in his room. So the speculation that Incan studied black magic is no longer speculation, but an established fact, said Elena. Among Incan's belongings, an old book on black magic was found, which can't be obtained in the usual way. Also, after a black magician dies, his body disappears without a trace, narrated the butler. "What about Senior Viscount Mahjong, Incan's father?" asked Elena. "Says his son's affairs have nothing to do with the family. He promised to apologize to the duchy. He also sent a formal request to the palace to erase the name of Incan from the family genealogy," replied Ben. By the way, madam, I have something to tell you about the free medicines mentioned earlier. The trial run date for the medicines has been pushed back a few days earlier than planned. And it's all thanks to Anna, who played a big part in saving you. On that day, she demanded to personally give the earring to the Duke. As we later learned, she was afraid that if she told anyone else about it, it would interfere with your release. The next day, Elena decided to meet with the head of the Black Tower. "I feel fine, thanks for asking. You, on the other hand, don't look so good," Elena remarked. "It's been a lot of work lately, so I haven't been getting much sleep," Kedrian admitted. "I invited you over to my place to thank you for putting a tracking spell on my earrings," said Elena. "Come on, it's just an improvised magical engraving, and not a perfect one either. If it were an official artifact, it would be much more useful." Kedrian called for a box of magical artifacts. These magical artifacts contain the magic of movement, communication, and defense against attacks. They are designed to respond only to the voice of the first wearer. They can be used immediately by simply saying a certain word. I will provide you with a guide to the keywords and similar effects for each artifact. Please learn my instruction. Head of the Black Magic Tower, I want to confess to you that I recently learned some rather curious information. As it turns out, you are known for your lousy temper. So why are you acting so innocent with me? Why do you do everything I ask of you?" asked Elena. "Are you doing all this just because of my husband? Are you guilty of something in front of him? You don't really care if I get hurt or not. You're more worried about what my husband will worry about if something happens to me." "Why do you think that? Why don't you allow the thought that I like you? Why can't I do something nice just for you?" Kedrian asked. The Duchess's words stumped him. "Do you think I'm a fool? Not a good judge of character? I realize perfectly well that I have absolutely no interest in you as a woman. I think you've gotten too involved in your friendship with my husband," Elena replied. "I was told that you and my husband were originally priests. Kaywin told me that you met by chance and quickly became close friends. Now, however, I see that you are showing an overly devoted friendship towards him. Tell me why you are acting this way towards my husband. I know there's something fishy going on." "The Duke helped me leave the priesthood once," Kedrian admitted. "There's likely to be some sad story coming up. Do I want to hear it? Maybe I shouldn't dig into someone else's past. I don't want to rub his sore wounds. Even though I'm very curious, it's best not to ask too many questions." Elena thought to herself. "Okay, I get it. My husband is your benefactor. Since he is, your loyalty makes sense. Thank you for bringing me the artifacts. I will definitely find a good use for them, for they could save my life," said Elena. "Because you're sleep-deprived, you don't look good. So when you get back to the tower, be sure to heat it up. And before you go, I want to ask you something. Do you know anything about black magic?" "You want to know something specific?" Kedrian clarified. "I'm wondering how to recognize a witch doctor. Do they emanate some sort of foul odor?" asked Elena. "About the foul odor? I don't know anything. As far as I know, such information has never been confirmed. However, it is very even likely. Some kinds of black magic can be learned only by being near a corpse." Kedrian answered after a bit of thought. "Preferably, the corpse should have been lying around for more than 15 days. It is quite possible that the odor of a decomposed body impregnates the living person and is not washed away afterwards." "Is there any magic opposite to black magic?" asked Elena next. "I have yet to hear of a magic that can defeat black magic. They are two different powers, and they work in completely different ways. Also, there is no such thing as completely white magic," Kedrian replied. During dinner, Kaywin noted that his consort was in a good mood. "You know that the head of the Tower of Mages came to see me today. He brought me many useful artifacts. I am happy that I unexpectedly received such a wonderful gift. What a good man Kedrian is, after all," Elena exclaimed. "So you're rejoicing that some man gave you a gift?" mumbled the Duke. The next morning, Elena received a mountain of all sorts of gifts from her spouse. In the evening, Elena suggested that her husband take a walk through the night garden. She found it extremely romantic. Recently, when Elena was near her husband, she felt a rapid heartbeat, but the girl did not understand what this was due to. Why was she starting to react to him like that? Hey, heart, why are you pounding like that? Maybe it's just because of the darkness? Elena thought to herself and pressed her hand tightly to her chest. And why did you suddenly decide to take a walk in the garden at night? Have you become tormented by insomnia? Asked the Duke to his spouse. I can't sleep tonight for some reason, and so I usually fall asleep normally. And stop acting like I'm a porcelain doll, Elena replied. As the temperature began to drop rapidly, Elena suggested that her spouse return to the room. The girl had one brilliant idea. As a child, when I whined that I couldn't sleep, my nanny would tell me stories. But since I'm an adult now, I don't want to hear fairy tales. I want to listen to you. Tell me something about yourself that I don't know, asked Helena. I would love to hear about your victories over monsters. Tell me about the battles you've been in. The Duke began to tell about how 8 years ago he went to fight monsters. There were several hundred of them. It took months to chase them off the lands of the duchy. Listening to her husband's lulling voice, Elena fell fast asleep. Sir, you called for me? Asked Ben with a bow. As for the major purchase I mentioned yesterday, I wish it would go much faster. No matter how much more we have to spend. Also, look in the maid's room and tell them not to wake the Duchess today. Kywin replied. Entering the Duchess's room, Ben told her that she had guests arriving. Stepping out into the courtyard, Elena saw her maid Mary. With a joyful shout, Mary threw herself into Helena's arms. I came to pick you up personally to take you home, grumbled Elena's brother. You show up at my door unannounced and claim you intend to take me back to my parents' home? What does all this mean? Elena asked her brother. When we read your letter, we conferred and decided that for your own safety, it would be best to take you home. After a few days of deliberation, Father agreed as well. So let's go home. Go pack your bags, Edward ordered. If I understand this correctly, you're insisting that I dissolve my marriage and come home for good? Don't be ridiculous. I have no intention of coming home. I'm safer here than I am at home, Elena replied. What are you talking about, Elena? You were almost kidnapped. What kind of safety are we talking about now? Edward exclaimed. Do you even know where the criminal who tried to kidnap me is from? He came here from the capital. It was an accident, and the reason is not ducal at all. Are you telling me that this wouldn't have happened to me in the capital? Elena asked. I want to assure you that after that incident, I have made myself safe. I now have artifacts to help me protect myself from any eventuality. I also have good security in the form of knights. They are very loyal and have great skills. Edward, I know you are worried about me. Thank you for that. Also, thank you for coming here for me. I am extremely surprised at that and very grateful. However, as I'm sure you've already seen, your worry is unnecessary and unwarranted. I will not return home as I see no need to do so. I will assign you and Mary a room each so that you may rest after your journey. But you can't guarantee to anyone that what happened will never happen again, Edward exclaimed. And do you know which store is the safest in the world? It's that store where valuable merchandise has been stolen. That's why there's no place better than this estate. Everything is here to guarantee my safety, Elena replied. Still, I don't consider this place safe. I didn't want you to marry someone with bad rumors at all. What if the curse spills over to you? Said Edward. How can you say that? You're my brother. You're supposed to trust me, shouted Elena in an irritated voice. And there you are. I heard we had some important guests over, so I stopped by to say hello. I hope I'm not disturbing you, said the Duke, who entered. You don't have to trouble yourself too much. These guests are already going home tomorrow, said Elena and smiled sweetly at her husband. It's been a long time, Sir Edward, said Kywin and extended his hand for a handshake. This is our first meeting since we got married, murmured Edward and shook the Duke's hand. Lady, how have you lived all this time without me? Mary asked Helena. I don't even know what to tell you. All in all, it's been fine. And how are you yourself? Asked Elena. Don't even ask that. I had a really hard time without you guys for the first time. Thank goodness my boyfriend Millen comforted me, replied Mary. Edward walked over to Elena and suggested that she discuss a couple of things. "You've been obnoxious since you were a little girl. Surprisingly, with such a nasty temper, you weren't greedy at all. You never once asked for anything or threw a tantrum. There were no whims," said Edward. "I never thought you'd think that about me," admitted Elena. "A few months ago, you insisted on something zealously for the first time in your life. You gave absolutely no thought to the consequences and even lied to your family. You told us you were head over heels in love with Duke Mayhad, but that's a lie, isn't it? Why did you marry him?" "Helena, you and I are not strangers. Do you think I don't realize when you are deceiving? Yes, we gave you our consent to this marriage, but after your letter, we began to regret it greatly." "I tell you again, what happened has nothing to do with the Duke," grumbled Helena. "And I will no longer insist that you return home, but I beg you to at least see your father and reassure him. Tell him everything you've told me. He is very worried about you," said Edward. Elena decided to use the magical circle of movement to travel to the capital. "See what kind of friend my husband has? And after this, you keep insisting that it's not safe here?" Elena asked her brother. "He will transport us to the capital in a heartbeat. Not every mage is capable of that," boasted the girl. It was Kywin who had insisted that his consort go home and reassure her father. The Duke was afraid that the Earl would hate him if he didn't let Elena go home. Kywin wanted to look good in the eyes of Elena's family. "I'll be back soon, so don't pine much without me," yelled Elena to her husband. "I'll be waiting for you," Kywin promised. Elena walked over to her husband and kissed him on the cheek. She would only be gone for a few days, but she was already beginning to long for him. The girl was used to Kywin being by her side all the time. Elena's sister was glad to see her again. The servants were also happy to see Elena back. "Elena, are you here already? You came quickly after all," said the Count, seeing his daughter on the threshold of his study. "Remember when you were a child, you used to love to stand by the fireplace," mumbled the Count. "I was constantly freezing, so I tried to stay as close to the fire as possible. I keep wrapping myself in warm clothes, even now," said Elena. "You are very much like your mother in that. You both love warmth. When I look at you, I often think of her. Maybe that's why I've always tried to patronize you. Elena, do you remember what I told you at the wedding? You can come home whenever you want." "Yes, I remember that," mumbled Elena. The girl didn't understand what her father was getting at. He was a little strange today. "I wanted to remind you that it will always be like this. Don't think about the situation or others. Let your heart tell you what to do. Remember, we are always waiting for you with open arms," the Count went on to say. "We care for you very much and wish you nothing but happiness. Whatever happens, we are always there to help you and support you." "Yes, Papa, I know that," whispered Elena. Bitter tears flowed down the girl's cheeks. The girl had already forgotten how good it felt to be home after all. She was among people who loved her, next to the fireplace, crackling lullingly. Maybe her father was right. She should go back.